Hey guys, tonight we drift through moonlight on the Aegean Sea, where the waves lap quietly against a wooden hull, and the stars glimmer like forgotten lanterns overhead. You're lying on your back, somewhere between dream and waking, aboard a modest trading vessel creaking softly with the swell. Salt hangs in the air, and your fingers trace the grain of the deck beneath you. It's not a cruise ship, not even close, but it's steady, and in this moment, the night is yours. A pale mist curls in low across the water, hugging the ship like a sleepy cat. It rolls silently, unnaturally slow. The crew mutters about it, but you can't help staring. There's something off. The moonlight passes through the fog and scatters like it's moving through wine rather than water. You squint and you think, though you're sure you must be wrong. You see the shimmer of grape leaves tucked into the haze. And then, from the edge of the ship, someone steps out of the mist. Not walks, steps, as if he had been standing in it all along, waiting for his cue. He's young, maybe no more than 20, with curls like ivy vines and a robe loosely knotted at the waist, like he's wandered out of a toga party that ended 4 centuries too early. No shoes, no belongings, just a calm smile and eyes that glow faintly gold in the moonlight. He doesn't speak right away, just leans against the railing like he's been traveling for years and the sea is a familiar friend. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with where you're listening from and your local time. It's always fun to see where the night reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push yourself to your feet slowly, the dream haze still thick in your head. The deck is slick with dew or spilled wine, you can't quite tell. Around you, sailors resume their business, but it's quieter now. They glance sideways at the newcomer. No one speaks to him, but no one asks him to leave either. There's a silent agreement forming, and you're not part of it. As the sails catch a sudden breath of wind, you notice the newcomer hasn't moved. He stands there, perfectly balanced, as if the ship isn't moving at all. You've been at sea long enough to recognize a land dweller when you see one. There's always a bit of stagger, a bit of seasick hesitation. Not him. The ship creaks again, but this time it's deeper, lower, as if something is shifting below the surface. Someone behind you mutters, "Bad omen." You glance back. It's one of the older deckhands, a man who smells like salt and goat cheese. He's not looking at the stranger. He's looking at the mist. The mist is thicker now. Historians still argue whether sailors genuinely believed gods could walk among them. The deckhand says absently, though you're pretty sure he's just talking to himself. Or if they were just really, really drunk. You walk past him slowly toward the bow. Your hand rests on the rope rail. A gull circles once overhead and vanishes into the fog. You look back at the stranger. He's sitting now, cross-legged, gently humming. The melody's familiar, but you can't quite place it. Later, someone will say it was an old Thracian hymn. Another will swear it was the tune his grandmother used to hum while brewing raisin wine. Still another, years from now, will recreate it on a lute and claim it's the lost song of Dionysus. But for now, it's just soft enough to lull you. You close your eyes, just for a second, and then, "Passenger aboard!" someone calls from the crow's nest. It's been a while since anyone's made a fuss about passengers. You're a cargo ship, technically, mostly wine, olives, and textiles. But when the money's good, a body here or there doesn't hurt. Except, no one remembers picking him up. The captain, a narrow-eyed man with a beard shaped like a sickle, emerges from the cabin. He eyes the stranger. "Where's your coin?" he asks. The stranger smiles. "Where's your name?" the captain presses. The stranger tilts his head. "Which one?" The silence that follows isn't tense. It's thick, like syrup. You know the myths. Everyone does. But you also know their stories, just bedtime warnings for drunkards and fishermen. Still, something inside you pricks. You take a step back. Another sailor mutters, "He smells like vineyards in spring." You smell it too. The scent of pressed grapes, of fermenting joy, of something rich and wild and slightly illegal. It doesn't come from any barrel on board. It's him. The wind shifts again. And this time, the sails catch hard, like they're responding to something beyond air. The ship lurches. The captain turns sharply on his heel and walks back to the cabin. You can't tell if he's scared or pretending not to be. The stranger? He hasn't moved. Still smiling. Still humming. You sit down beside a coil of rope, heart thudding a little louder than before. Maybe you should have stayed in Athens. Sure, the traffic was awful, and yes, the olives were overpriced, but at least the people there didn't shimmer. The stranger hums louder. The mist thickens. And for a moment, just one brief, flickering moment, you think you see something curling up the mast. Something green. Something leafy. But when you blink, it's gone. You wake to the sound of goats. Or at least you think it's goats. It's that unmistakable bleating sound, but softer, distant, warped by the fog. You sit up slowly, rubbing your eyes. The ship hasn't stopped moving, but the motion has changed. Gentler, rolling like you're inside a barrel of wine being rocked to sleep. The crew is unsettled. You see it in the way they avoid looking at each other, in how the usual banter, the teasing, the off-color songs, the muttered gripes about the cook, is gone. There's only the creak of wood, the rustle of sails, and the occasional bah floating in from nowhere. You glance toward the stern. He's still there, the stranger, reclining now, one knee bent, elbow propped lazily, as if this whole thing, the ship, the sea, the fog, was just an elaborate hammock built for his amusement. The same unnatural stillness clings to him. His robes look lighter than air, almost translucent now, and around his shoulders is that ivy? No one put that there. You're sure of it. And yet, the green leaves coil casually down his chest like they've always belonged. One sailor, young, nervous, constantly chewing on the same piece of leather, tries to confront him. "Where'd you come from?" he demands, voice cracking like a dry branch. The stranger looks at him, slowly, smiles. "From joy," he says simply, and the sailor runs, just turns on his heel, nearly trips over a rope, and disappears below deck. No one follows him. You're left blinking at the space between them, wondering what kind of answer that was, and why it sounded true. Down in the hold, the barrels shift again. You hear it, a thick, sloshing sound, followed by a soft, rhythmic thump-thump, like something large is stirring inside one of the wine casks. Historians still argue whether these sea journeys really felt as mystical as the records suggest. Your brain offers helpfully, trying to logic its way through this. Maybe it was all just moldy grapes and hallucinations. Maybe, but there's something about the air. Feels alive, brimming, like a vineyard at harvest, buzzing with bees and laughter, and that tipsy feeling that sneaks into your knees before you've had your second cup. And now, the smell of grapes isn't just on him. It's everywhere. The sails smell faintly of raisin. The ropes, when you grab one, leave a stickiness on your fingers. The floorboards seem darker, as if they've been soaked in vintage. You glance over the edge. The sea is different. Not angry, not calm either. It's moving in gentle spirals, almost like it's swirling around you. And in the water, yes, there it is, you see something flash silver. A fin. Then another. Not sharks. Too sleek. Too curious. Dolphins. They're pacing the ship now, gliding alongside like old friends. You watch one twist midair in a lazy arc and land without a splash. Chirps once, just loud enough to break your trance. The stranger finally speaks again. His voice carries easily, though he doesn't raise it. "Do you know why the gods favor dolphins?" he asks the open air. No one answers. They're the only ones who laugh like us. You blink. You're not even sure what that means, but it lands somewhere in your gut like truth does. Quiet, unexpected, sticky. Then he points to the barrel nearest the mast. It's shaking now, not violently but insistently, like something wants out. The captain appears again, flanked by his two most loyal crewmen. One carries a dagger, the other a net, and you think, oh, this is going to go badly. They approach the stranger with what they probably believe is calm authority. The captain holds up a hand. "Enough games," he says. "Tell us who you are." The The stranger doesn't move. "I'm warning you," the captain continues, and his voice has that edge, sharp like wine turned to vinegar. The stranger tilts his head again. "I gave you my name," he says. "You just didn't understand it." The sailor with the dagger lunges. You don't even see the stranger move. One moment, the blade is aimed at his shoulder. The next, the sailor is frozen in place, arm trembling, eyes wide. Behind him, the vines. They've grown. You didn't notice when or how, but they've spread across the deck like cracks in marble. Twisting, coiling, blooming in small purple clusters. They wrap around the sailor's ankle, just one tendril, and he gasps like someone stepped on his lungs. The captain drops the net. "Dionysus," someone whispers. It's not clear who says it, but everyone hears. The name hangs in the air like incense, and just like that, it clicks. The stranger, the grapes, the mist, the laughter, the dolphins. You're not on a cargo ship anymore. You're on a floating temple. The wind quiets. Even the sea hushes. A single cluster of grapes drops from the mast with a soft plop and lands at your feet. It rolls once, stops, and seems to stare at you. You don't pick it up, because now the story is happening to you, and you suddenly remember the old legend you heard once, half asleep in a bathhouse, retold by a merchant with too many teeth. The story of pirates, arrogant and greedy, who once kidnapped a beautiful youth, thinking to ransom him, only to learn too late they had seized a god. He turned their sails to ivy, their oars to serpents, and them, he turned them into dolphins. You blink, but the vines don't go away. They've crept silently across every wooden surface. The mast, the railings, even your boots. You wiggle your toes, expecting resistance, but the vines only sigh softly, like they're breathing with you. Across the deck, Dionysus, yes, no more the stranger now, leans forward ever so slightly, as if inviting you into the secret. His eyes, half-lidded and glinting like wine in candlelight, rest on the captain. The poor man is frozen mid-thought, mouth open, fists clenched. You can almost hear the inner argument. Do I run? Do I kneel? Do I offer him my best amphora? Behind him, the sea has begun to ripple in mesmerizing spirals. Not stormy, not hostile, but purposeful. It's like the water is dancing around the ship. Or maybe with the ship. You glance upward and, oh, the sails are changing. What once was linen, stained with tar and salt, is now unfurling in hues of plum and indigo. Clusters of grapevines bloom across the canvas like ink in water. The air is heavy with sweetness. And music. There's music now, soft, fluting notes coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Historians still argue whether this story was born from early wine hallucinations or embedded ritual myths. Your sleepy brain offers again, trying to ground you. It's a fair question. Wine was sacred. Wine was also unreliable. But the grapes on the mast are undeniably real. One drops into your hand without warning. It's warm, alive. You don't eat it. Somehow that feels like crossing a line you're not ready for. Dionysus rises at last. His feet don't make a sound on the deck. He moves like mist through ivy. Slow, unhurried, inevitable. As he walks, the vines move too, parting and curling back with deference. He walks straight toward the captain. And when he speaks, it's not with rage. It's disappointment. "You saw joy," he says quietly. "You saw beauty. You saw freedom. And your first thought was to trap it in chains." The captain opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's fear. Or maybe the grapes really have fermented the air into silence. The dolphins leap again beside the ship. One of them, larger than the rest, seems to look right at you. And then you hear it. The song. It's faint at first, like something carried on a breeze from another life. But it grows louder, lush, layered, full of strange harmonies. Female voices, male voices, animal cries, laughter, sobbing, all swirling together like wine in a cup. Dionysus turns to the crew. Some fall to their knees. Some cry. One sailor, The leathery one who'd laughed too much the day before starts tearing at his shirt, weeping, saying something about his mother. You think, this isn't madness, this is memory, because you remember now. Stories whispered in smoke-filled courtyards, songs sung only under new moons, stories about gods who weren't always kind, but were always honest. And this strange, beautiful god, he only ever asked one thing: let yourself feel everything. But these pirates, your crew, they tried to bottle the god of chaos like a commodity, a prize, a hostage. They didn't realize. No one cages ecstasy. No one ties down a god of wine without the wine pushing back. Do you regret it? Dionysus asks, almost conversationally. The captain nods wordlessly. Dionysus tilts his head. Ivy spills from his sleeves like curious snakes. I don't need apologies, he says. I need change. And that's when the water surges. But not toward you. It climbs the sides of the ship like it's alive, like it's claiming its due. In long, silvery waves, the sea reaches across the deck. Not to drown, but to touch. Each crewman it touches transforms. It starts with their skin, shimmering, flattening, turning the color of pearl and sky. Then their fingers melding, webbing. Then their feet becoming tails. No screams, only silence. Awe. The first man falls into the sea with a splash. Then the second. Then 3 more at once. You don't try to stop them. You don't even move. It's beautiful somehow, like watching statues melt into music. Dionysus watches without judgment, only sadness. These were not bad men, he says softly, more to himself than to you. Just men who forgot what it means to be open. You're afraid to ask what happens to you. But he turns toward you anyway. You brace yourself. But he smiles. That maddening, lazy, sweet as figs smile. You listened, he says, and you exhale. Not because you're safe, but because you understand. He didn't come to punish. He came to remind that joy, real joy, isn't quiet. It isn't polite. It doesn't come with instructions or rules or reliable packaging. It comes like wine at a feast. Messy, overflowing, deliciously dangerous. And when you try to sell it, steal it, or store it, turns you into a dolphin. Another wave crests the side of the ship. But it doesn't touch you. It only brushes your sandals. Cool, briny, oddly affectionate. The last of your crewmates is gone. And below, the sea is alive with leaping shapes. You hear laughter, real laughter, from deep within the water. A whole pot of joy. And somewhere in that sound, maybe, just maybe, they're starting to remember how to feel. The ship drifts now, utterly still, as if stunned into serenity. The sails, once vibrant with ivy and myth, settle again into gentle sways, sighing with every warm gust that rolls in off the glittering sea. You stand alone on the deck. Well, not alone. Dionysus is still there, and so is something else. A feeling, like you've just woken from a dream where every sense was turned up too loud, too alive, too rich. The kind of dream you half hope won't fade. The dolphins circle below. One performs a slow spiral through the air and lands with a satisfied splash. The others trill and click, responding in what sounds suspiciously like applause. You want to laugh, or cry, or pour a glass of wine and toast the ocean. Dionysus stretches, feline and content, then leans against the mast like he has all the time in the world. Which, let's be honest, he probably does. Now that the theatrics are done, you expect him to vanish. Puff of mist, a clap of thunder, something cinematic. But no, he stays. He even offers you a figure. Just plucks it out of nowhere like a magician with fruit-based sleight of hand. You take it, and it's the best fig you've ever had. Warm, earthy, slightly fermented, like it grew in a dream garden you once visited as a child but forgot until just now. Not every story ends in a lesson, he says, half laughing. But this one does. Kind of. He gestures toward the water, where a few dolphins continue to play, flipping through the air like they've just remembered they have spines and joy. The pirates, those surly, grumbling men with pockets full of coins and minds full of plunder, are now gliding through the sea with a kind of freedom they never had on land. Some myths are warnings, he adds. Others are invitations. The implication hangs there like mist. Historians still argue whether this entire episode was ever meant to be literal. Some say the pirate transformation was symbolic, an allegory for Dionysus turning enemies into revelers, making followers out of foes. Others believe the tale was once part of secret initiation rites for his cult. Wine, music, confusion, fear, and then release. There are even stranger theories. One scholar, probably with too much time and too little wine, suggested that dolphins were seen as halfway creatures, joyous but eerie, wild but intelligent. A perfect in-between form for those who disrespected the god of blurs and boundaries. Not quite punished, not quite blessed, suspended forever in play. And yet here you are, not a dolphin, not a myth, just awake and oddly alive. You peer over the edge of the ship and watch them below. Their sleek bodies dart in elegant arcs, not frantic, not afraid. If anything, they seem relieved, as if they've finally escaped the weight of being men who forgot how to dance. One dolphin swims close, rolling sideways to eye you with a flash of recognition. You could swear it's the leathery sailor who used to snore like an ox and complain about everything from rations to the color of the sky. He clicks once, twice, then rolls away and vanishes into the blue. You're not sure what it means, but you feel oddly comforted. Dionysus stands beside you, brushing grape leaves from his robe like loose thoughts. You know, he says idly, they'll tell this story for centuries. You nod. Of course they will. They'll argue about the details, he adds. Was it punishment? Was it mercy? Did the ship become a vineyard? Was I even here? You look at him sideways. Were you? He winks. Depends how much wine you had. You both laugh and the sound surprises you. It's gentle, real. The kind of laugh that bubbles up from your stomach, not your throat. Like the vines inside you are beginning to grow, too. And for the first time in what feels like days, you notice the horizon. Golden, endless, and in the distance, land. Or is it? Could be more vines. Or a mirage. Or some poetic metaphor about returning to reality after a mythic detour. But Dionysus doesn't press you. Up to you where the story goes next, he says. You can steer back to port, write a scroll about transformation, start a vineyard, join a play, or he glances down at the sea. You follow his gaze. There's a dolphin waiting below, not pressing, just waiting. You could jump. Your breath catches. Just for a bit, he says, grinning. See what it's like. The fig is still in your hand, half-eaten. The ship is still solid beneath your feet. The god is still beside you, but the wind smells different now, like possibility, like endings, like beginnings. You close your eyes, and when you open them again, you're not sure if you ever jumped, or if the sea reached up to hold you, or if this whole voyage happened in a dream you had during a particularly luxurious nap on a hillside vineyard. But the salt on your skin tastes real. The figs in your pocket are still warm. And somewhere, just beneath the surface, a dolphin sings. The world, now tinted by salt and sunlight, feels softer, like your edges have blurred just enough to stop catching on every sharp thought. You sit near the bow of the ship, if it even is a ship anymore, legs dangling just above the sea. Every so often, a dolphin surfaces to chuff air beside you, a little exhale of joy. Dionysus leans against a crate that somehow turned into a barrel of wine. Of course it has. He twirls a grape between his fingers like a coin, then flicks it into the air, where it promptly vanishes into a puff of honey-scented smoke. So, he says casually, you want to know why? You look at him, blink once, then realize he means the whole dolphin thing. Why pirates? Why dolphins? Why bother? He takes a slow sip from a goblet that wasn't there a second ago and gestures expansively, as if the answer might be found somewhere between the breeze and the sky. It's always the same question with you mortals, he says. You get so hung up on the what, you forget to notice the how it felt. And honestly, he's got a point. But still, it is a weird move, isn't it? Turning pirates into dolphins? That feels like a very specific choice. You ask him. He shrugs. They were rude. Pause. And they tried to kidnap me. That part you remember. The men had stormed the shore, seen a well-dressed stranger alone and assumed, wrongly, that he'd be easy coin. They hadn't recognized the sandals, or the ivy crown, or the very obvious divine aura. They dragged him aboard, laughing. He'd smiled. They didn't laugh long. Still, pirates get punished all the time in myths. Cursed ships, shipwrecks, endless storms. But dolphins? That's oddly gentle. I liked them, Dionysus admits. In a way, they were free. A little too free. He grins. Needed structure. You can't tell if he's joking. Probably. Also, dolphins throw parties, he adds. They sing. They flirt. They herd fish in spirals. Total chaos creatures. Like me, but aquatic. You try to picture the pirates adjusting to their new forms. First, flailing. Then floating. Then maybe, just maybe, realizing they're still alive, still together, and surprisingly good at synchronized swimming. There's something comforting in that. Historians still argue whether dolphins were truly revered or just admired from afar in ancient Greece. Some records suggest they were seen as divine messengers, companions of Apollo and Poseidon, guides of souls. Other texts are less romantic, describing them as opportunistic fish stealers with suspicious intelligence. One fringe theory even suggests early sailors believed dolphins were reincarnated humans, especially sailors lost at sea. That idea alone makes the transformation of the pirates feel less like punishment and more like repurposing. Maybe Dionysus didn't destroy them. Maybe he relocated them, gave them a second chance, one with fewer weapons and more backflips. The ship shifts slightly, dipping into a current. Dionysus doesn't seem to notice. Or maybe he's steering it without touching anything. You realize that for a god known for indulgence and chaos, he's strangely calm. Not peaceful exactly, but confident. Like he understands that everything, even disasters, has a rhythm if you just stop thrashing. He offers you another fruit, this time a pomegranate. Because of course. You take it, bite into it. The seeds burst like tiny fireworks of tart and sweet. You're pretty sure your teeth just learned something about desire. Tell me, he says suddenly, have you ever been misunderstood? You nod slowly, because who hasn't? He smiles like he already knew. Yeah, me too. And just like that, you're no longer just a passenger in a myth. You're an accomplice, confidant, a fellow question mark in a world that prefers answers. He leans in. You know the thing about gods? We don't need followers. But we like company. The dolphins whistle in agreement. You glance out at the horizon again. That blurry line between sea and sky feels thinner now. Like if you lean too far, you'd fall into a different kind of story entirely. There's a strange comfort in that. You ask him, finally, if he ever regrets it, the dolphin spell, the pirates, the showmanship. He thinks for a moment, then shakes his head. No regrets. Only good stories. A pause. Though I do wish I'd taught them some songs first. You laugh. He joins you, and for a moment it feels like the ship is laughing too. Wood creaking, sails fluttering like a sigh. Strange. You set out to learn why Dionysus turned pirates into dolphins. But now you're starting to wonder if the better question was always why not. The ship glides smoothly now, as if the sea itself is a well-practiced stagehand pulling strings behind velvet curtains. You're no longer sure if it's floating, sailing, or simply existing in a suspended moment. Dionysus is sprawled on a cushioned bench that definitely wasn't there earlier. You'd ask where it came from, but you're beginning to understand questions are mostly optional around him. He's humming something ancient. Sounds like laughter wrapped in melody. So, you say, how did they find out you were a god? He grins, eyes twinkling. Oh, they didn't. Not at first. A little pause for theatrical effect. He's good at that, which made it more fun. You settle into the rhythm of the tale, which spills from him as naturally as wine from an amphora tipped just so. He'd boarded the pirate ship in disguise, looking like an elegant youth, soft-spoken, maybe rich, the perfect target for greedy hands. The pirates, Tyrrhenian most likely, though historians still argue whether it was the Etruscans or some pan-Mediterranean rogues. Sized him up, whispered, snickered. They tied him up poorly, which seems bold even by mortal standards. One of them, Acoetes, had hesitated. He'd sensed something strange about their captive. Too calm, too radiant, too vine-scented. Acoetes had tried to convince the others, urged them to turn back. Free the boy, leave well enough alone. They laughed. They always do. And then, Dionysus says, his grin widening, I decided to stretch. You glance at him. Stretch. Oh yes, flex the godhood a bit. So the ropes fell off. Of course they did. Then the mast turned into a vine. Then the oars sprouted ivy. Then wild animals, not just metaphorical ones, appeared. A bear prowling across the deck. A lion on the prow. A panther lounging next to the barrels. They screamed. He says with the fondness of someone recalling an especially good party. The men panicked, scrambled, fell overboard except Acoetes, the one who doubted. He stayed, eyes wide, respectful, probably rethinking his career path. The rest? Well, they didn't drown. They changed. You picture it in slow motion. Limbs bending, skin shimmering, bones reshaping. Human forms surrendering to something more fluid, more joyful. Tails where legs had been. Laughter where once there was cursing. A flurry of white water and whistles. And suddenly dolphins. Not just any dolphins. Sleek, silver-backed ones with eyes far too intelligent. Eyes that remembered how to tie a knot and hoist a sail. There's a theory among marine archaeologists that ancient Mediterranean sailors may have had regular encounters with pods of dolphins that followed their ships. These animals weren't just curiosities. They were sometimes credited with saving drowning sailors, guiding lost boats, even carrying messages. Was it divine intervention or just interspecies curiosity? Historians still debate whether these tales of dolphin heroes were literal, symbolic, or born of fermented imagination. But there's no denying how often dolphins pop up in old stories, especially Greek ones, and not just as rescues. In Crete, dolphins adorned palace walls. In Athens, they leapt on coins. In myth, they carried gods. Sometimes, as in this case, they were the myth. Dionysus twirls his goblet, watching it catch the light. They didn't scream for long, he murmurs. It's hard to scream when you're suddenly very into fish. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. What? Adaptability is divine. It's hard not to admire his flair. Other gods punish with lightning or plagues. Dionysus prefers poetic irony, preferably with a flourish of seafoam and a soundtrack. You know, he says, they still visit me, swim beside the islands, nudge fishing boats. Sometimes I think they remember. It's a lovely image. Ex-pirates now enjoying the best gig in the Aegean, free meals, endless swimming, and the occasional divine karaoke night. You ask about Acoetes, the one who stayed. He became a priest, Dionysus says simply. Told the story, spread the word. Smart man, good wine drinker. He sighs contentedly. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they just asked for a drink instead of trying to sell me. A small silence follows. The kind filled not with tension but with that quiet hum of reflection. Then Dionysus laughs. But then I wouldn't have dolphins, would I? He raises his glass to the sea. Somewhere beneath the waves, a shape flickers, sleek and fast and unmistakably joyful. Besides, he says, they got what they wanted. You blink. They did. He nods. A new life, a better one, less stabbing. You take another bite of fruit, fig now and somehow chilled, and chew thoughtfully. It's strange how myths often start with cruelty but end in curiosity. Transformation over obliteration. A lesson taught gently, if a little weirdly. He clinks his glass against yours, even though you didn't realize you had one. To creative consequences, he toasts. To dolphins, you reply. And far off in the distance, one leaps high into the air, twists and splashes back down, because of course it does. The boat drifts into late afternoon, or maybe early mythological evening. Time is soft here, like a sheep napping on a sun-warmed hill, uninterested in moving forward. You lean back, the deck creaking gently beneath you, and watch Dionysus reach for a fig that seems to have peeled itself out of politeness. So, you say, is that it? Pirates turned into dolphins. Lesson learned, everybody wins. He snorts elegantly. If only. You humans never stop at the first party. You raise an eyebrow. There were more. Oh, so many more. Because the pirate fiasco was just the beginning. A teaser. A divine appetizer, if you will. It was the story Dionysus used to introduce himself to the world, or more precisely, to remind the world who he'd always been. He had just returned from the east. And not just vaguely east of Athens. We're talking deep travel east, India, Arabia, the edges of Persian forests. There are wild accounts of Dionysus roaming through remote valleys, introducing grapevines to new soils, and showing local tribes how to ferment almost anything. Honey, dates, palm sap, even allegedly camel milk, though that last one may have been a translation error. Historians still debate whether Dionysus's mythical eastward expedition was inspired by real accounts of Alexander the Great's campaigns, retroactively mapped onto the god by later poets. But whatever the truth, the image stuck. Dionysus the traveler, the bringer of wine and ritual and dance to every corner of the known world. And what do travelers need? Followers, worshippers, entourages that can clap on beat and carry extra sandals. You picture it. A slow-moving, vine-covered procession snaking through dusty roads and coastal villages. At the front, Dionysus on a leopard-drawn chariot, lounging like he invented recline. Behind him, musicians, dancers, farmers, artists, ex-pirates turned storytellers, women in billowing robes with ivy crowns, men carrying jugs of wine like they're sacred relics. Because, well, they are. This wasn't your average religious movement. There were no 10 commandments, no stern warnings, no required donations or marble columns. There was only one rule: lose yourself. In the rhythm, in the wine, in the dance. For one night or 100, you could let go of your name, your station, your burdens. You could become someone else, or no one at all. And in a world where every breath was watched, taxed, or judged, what a dangerous and beautiful freedom that was. Not everyone approved. You imagine stiff-robed senators squinting from their balconies, watching the Dionysian train roll by, murmuring about moral decay and indecency, clutching scrolls and pearls in equal alarm. They weren't wrong to worry. Dionysus wasn't just fun. He was disruptive. A god who welcomed women into his inner circles, who honored the mad and the broken, who said ecstasy could be holy and that laughter could tear down empires. He wasn't chaos for chaos's sake. He was chaos that revealed truth. Do you know how many cities banned my rights? Dionysus muses, swirling his wine lazily. You shake your head. Most of them, he says, grinning. At first. One notable example, the city of Thebes, home to Pentheus, a young, suspicious king who famously tried to suppress Dionysian worship. Big mistake. Pentheus banned the ceremonies, arrested Dionysus's followers, called him a fraud. So, naturally, Dionysus disguised himself, again, he's very into that, and convinced Pentheus to spy on one of the secret baksheesh rituals. Told him to wear women's clothing. Said it would help him blend in. Spoiler, it did not help. What followed was less a party and more a cautionary tale wrapped in animal skins. Pentheus was torn apart by frenzied maenads, his own mother among them. They were in such a trance they thought he was a lion. You wince. That one's less dolphin. Why? Dionysus nods, solemn for once. Transformation doesn't always go the way you hope, especially when it's resisted. But not all cities fought him. Some embraced him entirely. Places like Naxos, where he allegedly found his lost love, Ariadne, sleeping on the beach after Theseus ditched her. Dionysus married her on the spot. Eternally romantic, that one. Even Athens, suspicious as it was, came around eventually. They built theaters in his honor, dedicated festivals, invented tragedies and comedies just to process the emotional hangover of being around him. Because that's the thing about Dionysus. He doesn't just bring joy, he brings catharsis. That deep, chest-rattling release when you cry too hard at a play or laugh too long with strangers. That moment when everything collapses. Grief, fear, longing, and you emerge lighter, changed, oddly relieved. He teaches that joy can be a revolution, that surrender can be strength, that identity can be flexible. You glance at him now, lounging on the deck in a robe that shifts colors when it catches the sun. Is he still the youth from the beginning, or older now? His face seems to shimmer with contradictions. Ancient and playful, tender and terrifying. I've been all of them, he says softly, as if hearing your thoughts. The boy, the wanderer, the husband, the lion, the vine. He reaches down and plucks a grape from a vine that shouldn't be growing out of the ship's railing. Offers it to you. Tastes like summer, and like endings, and like stories that never quite finish. I don't punish people, he says after a moment. Not really. I just reveal them. And maybe that's the truth at the heart of this wandering tale. Dionysus isn't a god of wine so much as a god of what happens after. After the laughter, after the transformation, after the masks fall off. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't becoming a dolphin. It's realizing you were never really human to begin with. The sea around you shimmers as the sun edges lower. The colors shift. Lavender skies bleeding into mulberry waves, and you find yourself lulled by the gentle hush of water slapping the hull. Dionysus isn't speaking now. Not with words. Instead, he hums softly, a tune older than any alphabet, as the story swims on without him. You think back to that last phrase, I just reveal them. It sticks with you, like wet ivy. And the more you sit with it, the more the dolphin tale starts to look less like a fable and more like a mirror. Because those pirates, they weren't punished for being pirates. They were transformed into what they already were, wild, curious, a little too quick to follow shiny things across dangerous waters. They were set free into their true form, playful, sleek, unchained by gold or gravity. And that's a pattern with Dionysus. He doesn't hammer people into submission. He seduces them into honesty. Let's talk about the Maenads. These were the women who followed him, his wild, dancing acolytes. Their name means raving ones, but don't picture frat party chaos. Picture trance-like devotion. Long processions into moonlit forests, singing that turns into shrieking, laughter that spills into wails and then circles back again. Historians argue whether the Maenads were literal worshippers or poetic metaphors for emotional release. Some say they were simply ecstatic dancers. Others insist they were real priestesses who entered altered states through wine and ritual. And a few fringe theorists, naturally, think they were early feminists in disguise, escaping the rigid roles of ancient Greek domestic life by throwing themselves into the divine arms of a god who didn't ask them to bake anything. Either way, they're unforgettable. They wore fawn skins and ivy garlands, carried thyrsus staffs, basically long sticks wrapped in vines and topped with pine cones. Don't laugh. In Dionysian myth, these thursoi could channel immense energy. Some versions say they could sprout honey. Others claim they became weapons if the Maenads were threatened. One slightly chaotic scroll insists the thyrsus was used to strike sense into the unbelieving. You imagine that moment. Some stern-faced official scoffing at the ritual. Then whack. Suddenly he's reciting poetry in a falsetto and asking for olives with his wine. And then there's the clothing, or lack thereof. The Maenads were famous for shedding layers mid-dance. Not out of seduction, but liberation. These weren't performances. They were unleashings. Centuries before anyone coined let loose. The Maenads were the blueprint, and men joined in too. Actors, farmers, exiles, sometimes even nobles sneaking out in disguise. During festival season, everyone became someone else. Or no one at all. You didn't need a title to dance. You just needed permission. And Dionysus offered it freely. Not everyone was thrilled. Ancient cities were built on rules: who could own land, who could speak in assembly, who could wear what, where, and when. The Dionysian rites, with their cross-dressing, trance states, and moonlit howling, made those boundaries feel optional. Like maybe identity wasn't fixed after all. Dangerous thoughts in marble towns. There were attempts to regulate Dionysian rituals. Edicts issued, secret ceremonies raided. In Rome, around 186 BCE, the Senate famously cracked down on backseat cults. They claimed the rites had become corrupt, with plots and poisonings and unsolicited nudity. It's always the unsolicited nudity that gets the laws involved. They passed a law called the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, banning Dionysian gatherings unless pre-approved by the state. You picture it now, some poor bureaucrat trying to regulate joy, scribbling down rules like maximum number of tambourines per worshipper, or no wine after midnight. Still, the cult persisted. It always does, because you can outlaw the party but not what it gives people: escape, surrender, the rare gift of becoming something else for a while. And speaking of escape, did you know Dionysus was considered a god of the theater? You blink. Wait, really? Oh yes, he's not just the wine guy or the rave guy. He's the patron of masks, of performance, of the stories we tell when we don't want to say the truth outright. Every spring, the Athenians held the City Dionysia, a theater festival that makes modern award shows look like community bake sales. Playwrights would compete, offering tragedies and comedies in Dionysus's name. The entire city would pause to watch. They even let prisoners out of jail to attend. That's how important the healing power of storytelling was. And at the center of it all, Dionysus, not sitting on a throne, but vibrating in every gasp, laugh, and weep from the crowd. The god of masks understood that fiction is sometimes the only way to say something real. You pause, letting that thought sink in. The pirates wore the mask of sailors. The Maenads wore the mask of madness. Actors wore literal masks. But Dionysus? He wore all of them, and none. Because he's not one thing. He's what happens between things. Between man and woman. Between sanity and ecstasy. Between logic and chaos. He is the liminal god, the threshold itself. You look around now and notice how far you've drifted. The ship is no longer on sea, or at least not the sea, you know. The sky has taken on that half-dream hue where stars begin to blink into view like shy fireflies. Dionysus smiles again, softer this time. You see why I don't do temples? You nod. He doesn't need marble columns. He's worshipped wherever laughter breaks out too loud at midnight. Wherever someone finds a new version of themselves in the mirror. Wherever we take off the mask and feel the breeze on our skin. And that, perhaps, is the most sacred transformation of all. The sails above you catch a breeze so soft, you'd swear it whispered. The ship glides now, smooth as poured wine, carving a lazy path across a sea that no longer belongs to geography. Somewhere between myth and memory, you travel not forward, but inward. You glance again at Dionysus, lounging against a crate of figs. He's telling you a story now, not with words, but with gestures. A wave of the hand, a quirk of the eyebrow, a finger traced lazily through the air that summons not sound, but scene. Suddenly, you're watching an old Greek village light up with torch fire. It's festival season again, but this one is different. No howling, no tambourines. Just a quiet ritual in the vineyard shadows. A clay jar passed in silence. Each sip a promise. Welcome to the Antisteria. This 3-day festival, one of the oldest in honor of Dionysus, was less about spectacle and more about thresholds. It marked the opening of new wine, sure, but also the crossing of boundaries between the living and the dead. Historians still debate whether the dead were thought to visit during Antisteria or if the festival simply acknowledged how thin the veil had grown. Either way, people smeared their doors with pitch, hung hawthorn garlands, and muttered protective charms. Spirits are like nosy neighbors, curious, but best kept outside. On the second day, the people drank in almost total silence. No toasts, no jokes, just sipping. Individually, but together. It was like communal solitude. An odd thing unless you've ever cried in a crowded movie theater and somehow felt comforted. The third day, Kaitroi, was for the dead. Pots of food were left out for visiting spirits. Not ancestors, mind you, not Grandma Phyllis. These were nameless dead. The forgotten, the restless, the pirates who'd never made it home, perhaps. And Dionysus? He presided over it all not as a rowdy god, but as a guide between worlds. You lean back now, realizing how many roles he plays. You've seen the god of wine, of theater, of liberation, of blurred lines. Now here he is again as Psychopomp, a companion of the dead, a gentle usher to the afterparty that follows existence. A lesser-known vase shows him descending into the underworld to retrieve his mother, Semele. Most gods avoid Hades unless absolutely necessary. Dionysus strolls in with a basket of fruit and a knowing grin, charming his way past Cerberus like he's greeting an old drinking buddy. He brings Semele back, not just out of love, but because, as usual, rules are suggestions to him. Death isn't final, not when the god of transformation is involved. And speaking of rules, do you know who really hated Dionysus? Pentheus. Ah yes, King Pentheus of Thebes. Straight-backed, rule-loving, fun-hating Pentheus. His whole vibe was basically, no dancing in my city. Dionysus, being Dionysus, shows up disguised as a stranger. Handsome, mysterious, possibly wearing eyeliner. He doesn't announce himself. He just starts drawing people in. Suddenly, the women of Thebes are sneaking off to the hills to worship. The wine flows, the drums pulse. Pentheus fumes. He tries to ban the worship, arrests Dionysus, not knowing who he's dealing with. And Dionysus, ever the improviser, plays along, lets himself be jailed, then escapes through miraculous means. Some say the doors melted, others say they vanished. One creative scroll claims the jailer got so drunk, he let him out in exchange for singing lessons. Eventually, Dionysus tempts Pentheus into dressing as a woman to spy on the Maenads. Let's pause there. Imagine this ultra-serious king, squeezing into borrowed robes, adjusting a wig, trying to look casual while climbing a tree to peep at a secret ritual. Historians argue whether this moment was a satire of gender norms or a ritual humiliation trope. But either way, it's deliciously awkward. Pentheus thinks he's clever, in control. The Maenads do not. In their divine frenzy, they mistake him for a lion, or perhaps more accurately, they see the lion inside him. The predator, the rigid ruler, and they tear him apart. Yes, it's violent, but in the sleepy haze of this story, you don't focus on the gore. You focus on the metaphor. Pentheus didn't die because he was evil. He died because he refused to change, to let go, to flow with the wine instead of damming it up. And Dionysus? He didn't kill him. He simply offered a mirror. The same mirror he showed the pirates. The same mirror he shows you now. It doesn't judge. It just reflects. In the distance, dolphins leap because of course they do. You're back on the ship, the sky full of stars, the world bathed in silver. You remember now why we started this journey. Why Dionysus turned pirates into dolphins. Was it revenge? Was it compassion? Was it just a prank? Historians still argue. Some say it's a cautionary tale about hospitality, a warning to treat strangers kindly, lest they reveal themselves divine. Others believe it's about transformation, that the pirates weren't punished at all, that they were freed. And then there's the interpretation that Dionysus, in his chaotic compassion, simply wanted them to play. Because what is a dolphin but joy with fins? They leap, they laugh, they sing underwater. They live in pods, not armies. And they never, ever try to sell stolen wine. The ship drifts on. You're not quite sure where you are anymore. But that's okay. You feel safe. The stories have softened. The stars above you blink slowly, like they're falling asleep too. And Dionysus? He hums again, low and warm. A lullaby in a language only the soul remembers. The sea grows quieter now, like even the waves are listening. You sit barefoot on the deck beside Dionysus. He's still lounging with that maddeningly peaceful smile, his fingers idly braiding a vine that wasn't there a moment ago. You ask him softly what happened to the dolphins. He shrugs as if to say, they're still out there, and maybe they are. Maybe every time a pod rises from the depths and spirals around a ship's bow, it's not random at all. Maybe it's old pirates, laughing, playful, free of their swords and greed and very uncomfortable sandals. You lean your head back and try to picture those early rituals again. Not the over-the-top Roman versions with too much eyeliner and not enough boundaries, but the original ones. The ones done in caves and under olive trees. Whispered, not shouted. Gentle, not wild. Historians still debate what early Dionysian worship looked like. Some describe private initiations, draped in secrecy. Others speak of ecstatic processions with flutes, drums, and ivy wreaths. There may have been masks involved. Some may have danced until they wept. Some may have wept until they danced. But one detail surfaces often. Wine wasn't just drunk. It was offered, shared, poured to the ground for gods and ghosts. This wasn't about getting drunk. It was about getting closer, to the divine, to nature, to each other. And Dionysus? He wasn't just the god of wine, he was the wine. That was the belief, anyway. When you poured it, you weren't just opening a bottle, you were unleashing a presence. It wasn't about belief the way we use the word now. It was about participation. You stepped into the ritual and it stepped into you. Imagine holding a kylix, that shallow Greek wine cup with handles on either side. As you tilt it to drink, a painted face appears at the bottom. Maybe a satyr, maybe the god himself. A little joke from the potter. A reminder, you're never drinking alone. One quirky tidbit, some kylixes were designed so that when you drank, the whole thing looked like a mask. To anyone watching, your face became something else. It's like the ancient Greek version of a Snapchat filter, except more vine leaves, fewer dog ears. These vessels weren't just tools, they were performers. Part of the symphony of wine, song, and laughter. Even in silence, they spoke. And as the cult of Dionysus grew, so did its reach. It stretched from the rocky hills of Thrace to the columns of Athens and beyond. Everywhere it went, it adapted, merged, became something local. In Italy, he became Liber Pater, the free father. Romans weren't subtle, but they were enthusiastic. The Bacchanalia, named for Bacchus, Dionysus's Roman name, were grand, wild, and eventually a little too popular. By 186 BCE, the Roman Senate was panicking. Not because of the noise, but because of the power. The gatherings were large, cross-class, and emotionally charged. People from all walks of life, bonding over wine and revelation, terrifying. So they cracked down, hard. They restricted the Bacchanalia to certain temples, capped the number of attendees, forbade men from becoming priests without official approval. The historian Livy claims the rituals had become orgiastic, corrupt, even murderous. But historians still argue whether that was true or just convenient propaganda. After all, nothing scares a Roman senator quite like poor people having a good time. Still, the worship didn't vanish. It went underground, resurfaced in art, poetry, theater. The stage became its sanctuary. And oh, the theater. Did you know Dionysus was also the god of drama? The entire structure of Greek theater, the amphitheater, the chorus, the masks, the very idea of storytelling through performance, was born out of rituals to Dionysus. In fact, the earliest plays were performed at the city Dionysia, a massive festival in Athens. Tragedies, comedies, satyr plays, all debuted there. Not in hushed halls, but under open skies. Audiences cheered, booed, wept. Judges ranked the performances like it was The Voice, but with more togas. Actors wore huge masks, not just to project emotions, but to become vessels. Much like the wine cups. They weren't pretending to be characters. They were characters, transformed if only for a few hours. It's fitting, isn't it? Dionysus, the shapeshifter, the boundary blur, gifting us the gift of fiction. A mirror held up to reality, but tilted, ever so slightly, to catch the moonlight. And here's a detail you'll love. The word tragedy comes from tragoidia, meaning goat song. No one's exactly sure why. Maybe goats were prizes for the best playwrights. Maybe early choruses wore goat skins. Maybe the bleating of goats was the original dramatic inspiration. If so, we owe theater to some truly melodramatic livestock. Scholars still argue. But what matters is this: Dionysus gave us stories. Not just to entertain, but to feel, to step outside ourselves, to question, to weep at things that aren't ours, and laugh at things that are too close. He gave us release. You look over at him now, and he raises an eyebrow like he knows exactly what you're thinking. No words, just that slight smirk that says, "You get it." He doesn't need statues or temples. He never did. His altars were vineyards. His hymns, the clink of cups. His sanctuary, the space between roles, between sorrow and joy, between pirate and dolphin. And maybe that's why he didn't kill them. He changed them. He saw through the violence, the fear, the desperation, saw their playfulness beneath the menace. He didn't destroy them, he gave them a better story, a new mask. And so they leapt into the sea, into legend, into 1,000 sleepy retellings that echo across waves and centuries. You feel your eyes grow heavier. The stars blur slightly, stretching into soft lines. The ship rocks you gently, a cradle carved from myth. Somewhere a dolphin laughs. The ship barely moves now. The sea has smoothed out like melted glass, and the moon is just a lazy coin dangling overhead. You blink slowly, your breath synced with the tide. Dionysus hasn't said a word in a while. Not that he needs to. The silence around him is never empty. It hums, and then he hums too. A tune that isn't quite a tune. It winds around you, threading through your ribs like ivy. You ask him if he ever gets tired of people telling his story wrong. He laughs, not harshly, just like someone who's heard all the rumors and kind of enjoys them anyway. Because let's be honest, Dionysus has been painted as everything from a party boy to a divine madman. A god of chaos, of ecstasy, of unrestrained emotion. And yeah, there's truth in all of it. But there's more. He's a god of paradox. Take his birth. It's not just strange. It's full-blown mythological soap opera. Zeus falls for Semele, a mortal princess. Classic Zeus move. Hera, ever the vengeful wife, gets jealous. So she disguises herself, convinces Semele to ask Zeus to reveal his full divine form. Semele does, and Zeus reluctantly agrees because, oaths and divine promises and all that. Cue instant immolation, because mortals aren't built to handle the full wattage of Olympus. But Semele was already pregnant. And Zeus? Zeus does what no OBGYN recommends. He sews the fetus into his own thigh. 9 months later, out pops Dionysus. That's right, thigh-born. No epidural needed, just celestial leg meat. One mainstream fact, this unique birth gave Dionysus his epithet, Demeter, twice-born. And being twice-born became a symbol of transformation, of rebirth, of crossing boundaries between life and death, human and God, sanity and madness. It's one of the reasons his cult appealed to so many. Because Dionysus didn't just belong to Olympus, he belonged to everyone. Outsiders, wanderers, broken-hearted poets, women boxed in by law, slaves dreaming of escape. He didn't ask you to be pure, just present. And that's important. Most gods of the Greek pantheon were obsessed with rules, structure, divine order. But Dionysus? He made a religion out of release. There's even a theory, one of those juicy scholarly debates, that early Christian rituals borrowed heavily from Dionysian elements. Wine as sacrament, symbolic death and rebirth, a god who suffers, dies, and returns? Historians still argue whether it was imitation, inspiration, or simple coincidence. But the overlap is striking, and it shows just how deep Dionysus's vines crept into the roots of human spirituality. He wasn't just a god of wine. He was the experience of wine, the blurring of lines, the softening of ego, the opening of the self. And that didn't always mean losing control. Sometimes it meant gaining a deeper one, the kind you don't get with reason alone. Now, about the dolphins, because you were thinking about them again. The Greeks didn't just admire dolphins. They revered them. To hurt a dolphin was considered a crime against the gods. Sailors believed they were sacred messengers, protectors of the sea. A dolphin swimming near your ship? Good omen. A dolphin leaping through waves? A sign you'd make it home. And here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient coins from cities like Taras and Knossos depict boys riding dolphins like seahorses. Full-on Poseidon-style dolphin rodeo, which is both majestic and deeply impractical. So when Dionysus turned the pirates into dolphins, he wasn't cursing them, he was elevating them, transforming cruelty into grace, punishment into purpose. Their laughter now bubbles up in the sea foam, their mischief harmless and gleaming. It's hard not to admire the poetry of that, because most gods in myths, they smite, they flood, they hurl thunderbolts and call it justice. But Dionysus? He shapeshifts. He plays with boundaries like clay. He doesn't destroy. He rewrites. And you wonder, how many people throughout history needed that? Needed a god who didn't demand perfection, but presence? Who let you cry, and sing, and drink, and dance badly, and scream into the wind without shame. You think about the Maenads again, the women who followed him into the wild. They weren't drunk all the time despite the rumors. That's just the ancient equivalent of tabloids judging a girl's night out. In truth, Maenads participated in deeply symbolic rituals. They communed with nature. They danced themselves into trance. They carried the thyrsus, a fennel staff topped with ivy and pine cones, which sounds adorable but was considered sacred, a symbol of fertility, power, and life force. It wasn't about madness. It was about freedom. They stepped out of their roles, mother, wife, servant, and into something rawer, older, elemental. That scared people, of course, especially men in charge. There are stories of kings trying to stop Dionysus's worship. One tried to imprison him, bad idea. The prison walls dissolved. Another banned his rights, only to be driven mad by visions of vines crawling through his court. Don't mess with wine gods, kids. But beneath those dramatic tales lies a real tension, between structure and chaos, between law and liberation, between keeping order and letting go. Dionysus represents the pulse underneath the marble, the heartbeat under the mask. And you're starting to understand. You tilt your head and ask, so, was the whole dolphin thing just about punishment? Dionysus looks at you, eyes half-lidded like a cat who's heard this question before. He raises a finger, tracing a lazy swirl in the air. No, he murmurs, and that's all he says. But you feel it. The answer isn't in words. It's in the transformation itself. The pirates weren't just being taught a lesson. They were being released from a version of themselves they didn't even like. Turned from takers into travelers. From violent men into playful beasts that carry joy instead of fear. It's a lesson you might carry too, tucked under your ribs like a secret talisman. That change doesn't have to be destruction. That punishment can also be poetry. And that sometimes the best way to save someone is to make them swim. You lean on the rail again, watching the moon dip lower. The ship hasn't changed course, but something in you has shifted. You're quieter inside now, like a song after the last note fades. Dionysus lounges across from you, utterly relaxed. One foot propped on the side of the ship, fingers absently twirling a strand of grapevine that wasn't there a second ago. He doesn't force conversation. He knows the story is starting to tell itself inside you. Still, you ask him, why pirates, though? Why them for your big sea miracle? He smiles, tapping his nose like you've stumbled on a trick question. Pirates, he says, were the perfect mirror. Greedy, rootless, thinking they owned every wave they crossed. Men who lived off the backs of others' labor. They symbolized the dark side of freedom, freedom without responsibility, without reverence, without art. And that, he says with a grin, is what truly offended him. Because for Dionysus, even chaos has to sing. You nod slowly. You're getting it now. The transformation wasn't vengeance, it was improvisation, like jazz. But there's something else tugging at you, a story beneath the story. And Dionysus, of course, knows exactly where you're going. He leans forward, and with the sleepy authority of a late-night librarian, starts talking about the Orphic mysteries. Now here's the thing. The Orphic tradition is like Greek mythology on mushrooms. It reimagines the gods with layers of cosmic allegory, secret wisdom, and metaphysical drama that would make even your most spiritual yoga teacher blush. In the Orphic version of Dionysus's myth, he isn't just born of Zeus and Semele. He's a reincarnation of a much older god, Zagreus, the son of Persephone and Zeus in one of his more disturbing disguises. Yep, Zeus turned into a serpent. You don't want the details. Anyway, little Zagreus was seen by the Titans as a threat to their power. So they lured the baby god with toys, then ripped him apart and devoured him. Dark stuff, but Athena rescued his heart and brought it back to Zeus, who swallowed it, and later fathered Dionysus with Semele, embedding Zagreus's divine spark into the new child. Mainstream historians agree this myth came from fringe mystery cults trying to explain the cycle of death and rebirth. And it reframed Dionysus not just as a god of joy, but of cosmic suffering. Historians still argue whether this story was part of mainstream Greek religion or just an underground spiritual remix. Dionysus says, eyes half shut like he's remembering it in real time. You sit with that for a minute, because if he was born of pain, no wonder he never turned away from the broken people. No wonder his magic was for the misfits, the mad, the mourning, and maybe the pirates too. You're still wondering what the Titans used to distract Zagreus when Dionysus casually says, "A mirror." You turn toward him, startled. "A mirror?" you ask. He nods. "And a spinning top, and dolls." But it was the mirror that got him. Your skin prickles, because now this whole myth starts to fold in on itself. The god of ecstasy destroyed by his own reflection, reborn into a world that fears what he represents, then mocked by pirates who try to profit off his disguise. And in return, he shows them their reflection. It's not just clever, it's mythic calculus, and yet somehow still deeply human. You think about mirrors, about seeing yourself clearly, about how rare that actually is. Even the pirates couldn't see Dionysus when he stood right in front of them. But the sea saw. It always does. And the dolphins? They're still out there, you know. Scientists today talk about how dolphins have individual names. They whistle specific tones for each other, like personalized greetings. They play, mourn their dead, form alliances. They're not just animals, they're cultures with flippers. Quirky tidbit. Some researchers have even trained dolphins to paint with their noses. Yes, aquatic abstract art. Somewhere Dionysus is proud. You ask him if that was the plan all along. He shrugs, then smirks. Plans are for Apollo, of course, the god of logic, music theory, sunbeams, and spreadsheets. Dionysus? He rolls with it, but that doesn't mean his magic is sloppy. It's just conversational. He gives people and pirates and gods a choice. He holds up a mirror and says, "Here, look, you can stay who you were or you can change. But either way, the ocean's moving. Better learn to swim." It's a kind of kindness, a chaotic, vine-scented kindness with occasional thunder and hallucinations. But kindness still. And tonight, you're floating in the middle of it. You close your eyes and imagine the ship from the pirate's perspective. The gold-stitched robes, the wine that refilled itself, the ivy crawling across the mast, the boy with soft eyes who somehow filled the entire sky. Maybe they did realize in those last seconds that this was no ordinary passenger. Maybe one of them, the youngest or the quietest, whispered, "We should let him go." And maybe Dionysus heard that. Maybe that's why they didn't drown, just changed. A breath later, and they were cutting through waves with joy in their veins instead of malice. Their laughter no longer cruel, their journey no longer aimless. You sigh, it's a good ending, but Dionysus waves a lazy hand. "It's not the end," he says. "Not yet." The sails ripple gently above you, the sound like soft applause from the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a dolphin clicks and whistles, a language you can almost understand now. Dionysus, still perched lazily beside you, lifts a finger. "Let's go deeper," he murmurs. The myth didn't stop with the dolphins. Not really. You tilt your head, blinking slowly. You thought the story had reached its arc. Pirates transformed, lesson taught, poetic justice delivered. But Dionysus just grins, that crooked god of revelry smile. That's the part mortals always get wrong. They want a clean finale. But my myths are like wine. You have to let them breathe. So the god spins another thread. You're back on the island of Naxos, that speck of earth where the pirates left Dionysus after kidnapping him. You hadn't thought much of it before, It seemed like just a mythological rest stop. But it's more than that. Naxos is where he meets Ariadne. Now Ariadne. She's the kind of woman the poets never gave enough credit. She's smart, sharp, and has just been dumped by a so-called hero Theseus, who stranded her on this island after she helped him escape the labyrinth of the Minotaur with nothing but a ball of string and a solid plan. You want to boo Theseus on the spot. Dionysus chuckles. He was a poser. A mainstream historical note here. Greek myths often evolved regionally, and different city-states portrayed figures like Theseus either as noble champions or glorified jerks. Athens, of course, leaned toward the former, but out on the fringes, in places like Naxos, stories shifted. And in some versions, it was Dionysus, not Theseus, who truly valued Ariadne. When Dionysus arrives on Naxos, he doesn't just rescue Ariadne. He sees her, honors her, marries her depending on the version, lifts her crown into the heavens and turns it into a constellation, the Corona Borealis. So now, next time you look up on a clear night and spot that gentle arc of stars, you'll know it was once the diadem of a woman the world forgot, until a drunk god decided she was worth remembering forever. Historians still argue whether the Ariadne arc was a later addition to give Dionysus a romantic subplot. Dionysus says, tracing a lazy spiral in the air. But between us, I always liked her. You watch his expression shift. He's not just the party god anymore. There's longing in his gaze, like someone who's loved deeply and lost just as much. It softens everything. The pirates didn't know him. Not really, but Ariadne did. And the transformation they triggered, it led him straight to her. Funny how even foolish violence can open a door. You ask what happened to Ariadne eventually. Dionysus pauses. She died, he says. Even gods can't stop that, always. But she's in the stars now. That's something. The wine god takes a breath that feels centuries long. I'm not the only one who's mourned her. The wind brushes your skin. The ship sighs. This is the part in the myth where you'd expect a victory lap. Dionysus transformed the pirates. He found love. He became truly the god he was meant to be. But instead, you feel the ache beneath it all. Because even myths have shadows. And even gods carry grief. That's what makes him different. Dionysus isn't Apollo, shining and precise. He isn't Ares, blunt force fury. He isn't Hermes, all tricks and speed. He's the god of tears inside laughter. Of loneliness inside the party. Of strange rebirth after brutal change. He sees what's broken and turns it into something beautiful. Or at least something new. You think again of the pirates, swimming now as dolphins, their old lives far behind them. Do they remember? Some versions of the myth say yes, that their dolphin forms still carry the memory of the transformation. That when they leap through the surf, it's a kind of worship. Quirky aside, in ancient Greek art, dolphins were often drawn with mischievous human expressions, as if the artists knew. They appear on pottery, frescoes, even coins, swimming joyfully near ships, playfully nudging humans toward shore. Not predators, not prey, just companions of the sea. You wonder if they sometimes followed Dionysus's ship, invisible to the other gods. Always there, always laughing. You ask Dionysus if they ever thanked him. He shrugs. They didn't need to. The ocean took them. That's enough. You stretch your legs, the ship rocking gently beneath you. You've stopped needing to ask what's real and what's myth. The lines blurred, maybe on purpose, but the feeling, that's real. That a mistake can become meaning. That cruelty can end in art. That a wild, half-naked boy on a ship might teach pirates, and you how to see the world differently. Even now, Dionysus is humming under his breath. A melody you don't recognize, but that feels old. Like it's been waiting for you. And you let it carry you, through the laughter, through the heartbreak, through the waves. The ship seems quieter now. The waves don't crash so much as sigh. Dionysus doesn't say anything for a while, and that's how you know the story is winding down. Not ending, never quite ending, but softening into something else. Still, there's one last curiosity hanging in the salty air. You glance over and ask, "So, did you ever see the pirates again?" Dionysus looks at you with that tilted grin, the one that usually means you're asking the wrong question. But I like it. Once, he says, and the ship tilts slightly, as if turning toward a memory. He tells you about a voyage years later, one no scrolls recorded and no priest dared inscribe into sacred myth. A ship crewed entirely by animals. Not humans turned into animals, not really, but creatures who carried stories in their eyes. A tiger who bowed before him. A leopard who guided the way through coral reefs. And yes, dolphins, sleek, grinning things that raced beside the hull. One of them even winked at him. Dionysus swore it. The strangest part? They didn't avoid him. They weren't afraid. They swam like old friends. Or maybe forgiven enemies. And you feel it like a thread pulled tight between timelines. The pirates didn't die that day. Not truly. They changed. They adapted. They lived. Mainstream historical fact here. Ancient Greeks believed that transformation, metamorphosis, was not punishment alone, but also possibility. Myths like that of Daphne turning into a tree or Arachne into a spider weren't necessarily cruel. They were about truth being too big for the human body. When someone crossed a god or fate itself, they didn't just disappear, they evolved. Changed form, but not story. So perhaps Dionysus gave the pirates the best end possible. One where they could never again exploit or dominate. One where they served something larger than themselves, the endless sea. As Dionysus finishes his story, you realize he's not really talking about them. He's talking about all of us, about how we get it wrong, and how the universe, strange and wild as it is, sometimes gives us another chance to get it right. Historians still argue whether the dolphin story was a morality tale, a seafaring myth, or just an origin story for why dolphins are so friendly to sailors. He muses, leaning back on the mast. But I say maybe it's all of those. Or maybe it's just a joke I played that got out of hand. There's a sparkle in his eye, and you're suddenly unsure again what's real. But you no longer care. Because the truth, the myth, the feeling is more important. You close your eyes briefly and let the wind touch your face. The ship rocks gently. You could stay here forever, caught in the lull between story and dream. And then Dionysus starts talking about wine again. Not the usual vineyard chatter. No, this time he's going on about how he taught mortals to ferment honey into mead before they figured out grapes. They forget that, he says, mock-offended. I was mixing potions long before their grandmothers knew how to crush a berry. Quirky tidbit. In certain Orphic traditions, Dionysus wasn't the god of wine first, but of fermentation, the mystery of transformation itself. Bread rising, milk turning to cheese, grape becoming wine, death becoming rebirth. You suddenly realize everything he touches transforms. Not just the pirates, not just Ariadne, not just the drink in your cup, but you. Since this journey started, you've been shifting. Not into a dolphin, don't worry, but into something quieter, calmer, softer, like some small, frantic part of you has unclenched. Maybe that's the real myth, that in a world full of control and rigidity, Dionysus offers surrender. He doesn't ask you to fight. He asks you to feel, to let go. You look out to sea one last time. The stars shimmer like spilled silver above the waves. And there, in the distance, you spot the faint flicker of the corona borealis, Ariadne's crown. It glows just a little brighter tonight. Maybe because you know its story now. Maybe because you're part of it. The ship turns, gently, and the wind carries you forward. No destination, just motion. The wine god raises his goblet in a silent toast. Not to victory, not to revenge, to transformation, to beginnings disguised as endings, to soft nights like this. The sea has gone mirror smooth now, the kind of surface that makes you feel like you're sailing through the sky rather than water. And Dionysus, he's gone quiet, which is usually a cue that the tale is nearing its final breath. You're still beside him, tucked into some scratchy but oddly comforting blanket of woven goat wool. The stars are thick above you, thicker than your worries. You don't ask any more questions. Not because you have none, but because some stories are best left to settle in your bones before you poke at them again. But Dionysus breaks the silence, of course. You know, I never liked how they write endings. You glance at him, eyebrow raised. Why's that? Too tidy, too moral, too... Conclusion why? He takes a long sip from his cup, which never seems to empty. Myths weren't supposed to end. They were supposed to ripple like waves. You throw a stone in, and the ripples keep going, even when no one's watching. And that, you realize, is exactly what happened with those pirates. Mainstream historical fact here. While the myth of Dionysus turning Tyrrhenian pirates into dolphins is the most famous version, ancient sources like Homer and Ovid each told it differently, changing names, settings, even outcomes. Scholars suspect it began as a local seafarer tale in the Aegean, meant to explain the unusually friendly behavior of dolphins toward ships. But here's the thing. The original tale might not have been about punishment at all. In some versions, the pirates aren't malicious, they're just foolish. Drunk, confused, unaware they've captured a god. And instead of vengeance, Dionysus gives them a role. He recruits them into the sea's divine ecology. A second chance, fish-shaped. Historians still argue whether that makes Dionysus kinder than other Olympians. Dionysus says now, absently tossing a grape into the air and catching it with practiced ease. Or just sneakier. You chuckle, already half asleep. Probably both. Here comes the fringe bit. Did you know that some ancient temples to Dionysus were built near dolphin watching spots? Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the people who built them understood something we've forgotten. That stories and ecosystems are intertwined. That myths aren't made up. They're remembered, encoded in behavior, sung into generations. You drift a bit further. The wine has hit, but gently, like a lullaby. Dionysus is humming now. Not words, just a tune that feels older than language. It winds around you like ivy. You think about everything you've heard tonight: pirates and metamorphosis, Ariadne and revenge, mischief and mercy. The story didn't go where you expected, but it went somewhere better. Into the soft, sloshy heart of myth, where gods are more like weird uncles than omnipotent rulers, and justice is less about fire and brimstone than creative employment opportunities for former criminals. Your last clear thought before slipping under is this: Dionysus wasn't just the god of wine. He was the god of permission. Permission to feel too much, to dance when you should be mourning, to forgive when you'd rather punish, to transform when you've run out of choices, and maybe, just maybe, to fall asleep mid-voyage, trusting that even if you wake up as a dolphin, at least you'll have a pod waiting. The ship rocks gently. The stars yawn above you. Time folds like a toga. The story ends, but the ripples keep going. Word count: 1041. Wind down: 300 words. And now, as our strange little odyssey draws to a close, let yourself drift even deeper. The waves are nothing more than a whisper now, soft, consistent, like breath itself. The stars overhead have dimmed ever so slightly, as if lowering their voices out of respect for your slumber. The ship sails on, but you no longer feel the movement. It's all motionless, suspended in a kind of timeless myth space. Dionysus has fallen silent, too. Not asleep. Gods don't really sleep, but he's quiet in the way vines grow or wine ferments. Still, but never inert. You're warm, safe, weightless. Let the details of the story, those pirates, those dolphins, that laughter, float backward into the seafoam. You don't need to hold them. They'll come back if you need them. Myths always do. In this moment, the only thing you have to do is breathe. Long, slow inhales. Longer, slower exhales. Let your hands unclench. Let your jaw soften. Let that little anxious narrator in the back of your head hush, if only for now. You've journeyed far. Across time, across imagination, across a glittering sea of storytelling. And for tonight, that's enough. The wind dies down. The ocean stills. Your thoughts stretch and yawn and curl up like cats in a patch of sun. Sleep comes like a tide, quiet, steady, inevitable. And just before you sink into it fully, maybe you hear it, one last dolphin laugh somewhere far off. Or maybe it's just the wind. Either way, you smile. Good night.